Welcome back, everyone, to Trekking Through Trek, the show where we go through every single Star Trek show and episode ever since the beginning. Today we're on Season 3 of Star Trek The Original Series. Now, TOS has went through a little bit of ups and downs, but for the most part, it's a classic 60s old sci-fi show, which is a lot of fun. And while some episodes are just kind of with most of them being the show kind of immediately takes to the hugest downturn in quality ever. NBC first planned to move Star Trek to Mondays for its third season, likely in hopes of increasing its audience after the enormous letter campaign that, of course, flooded the network in order to keep it still existing. The production companies have changed quite a bit, so at this point things were very unclear of what to do with certain shows that weren't doing as well as you'd imagine. Instead, NBC moved it to 10 p.m. where the normally younger audience of the show was incapable of even watching the show that they wanted to actually see. They then reduced the budget from $185,000 per episode as it was in Season 2 to $175,000. Roddenberry, of course, was incredibly frustrated by this and attempted to persuade NBC to give Star Trek a better day and time. Unfortunately, this did not work, and after growing exhaustion with the show, he decided to completely leave, remaining as, quote, an executive producer, which again means jack shit. Roddenberry left means the scripts were not revised or rewritten without him, when you can really tell that there was a big downturn in quality due to this. I make fun of Roddenberry with his oddities and his in the strange and sexual variety. However, Roddenberry was a good sci-fi writer. He knew what he wanted to do and what point he wanted to make with the series. And even if it wasn't perfect, without Roddenberry, Star Trek ended up being just schlock sci-fi. Other producers like Gene L. Kuhn and DC Fontana also left the show shortly afterwards, and the script quality greatly suffered because of this. A lot of the crew, the cinematographers and directors and other writers did not come back to this season, so a lot of the people that were in charge of this were kind of just either non-professionals who were very new to the industry or had barely worked in it at all, and certainly not sci-fi. This isn't just writers who didn't know Star Trek, this is writers who didn't fully know sci-fi. A lot of whom were brought in by one of the new producers, Robert H. Gustman, who left middle of the season. Thus, we have our big blue text season. Season 3 is very different than the previous seasons, and to a lot, it is the lowest point in the show. And I'll tell you right now, it's probably one of the worst seasons out of all of Star Trek. Yes, fans who really don't like the modern stuff, it's worse than that stuff, and I'll say that absolutely without a doubt. So, of course, those who know about it, or if you don't, time to really get into why likely Season 3 of TOS is as so mired as it is. I don't know, what's a good word for hated? As with before, we will go through these episodes via the actual star date. Now again, the star date was not something that they specifically really gave that much of a shit about, so some of the star dates are a little bit odd. Due to that, we have 3 episodes that actually take place earlier on before the rest of these episodes in the middle of Season 2. How Elaan of Troyes and Spectre of the Gun are mid-Season 2 right before I Mud, which is kind of funny. Speaking of which, let's get right into it. Elaan of Troyes. It's meant to be similar to Helen of Troy. In this, they have Elaan of Troyes. She is a woman who is from a different planet being brought to Troyes to make sure that those two people are united and they stop whatever war is going on there. She's meant to marry some weird green man, and she ultimately could care less. She apparently is so hot that she can make anyone do whatever she wants, and she ultimately kind of wrecks things up as the Klingons just start to invade, because Elaan keeps making it hard for them. It's not like she's really working with them, she just kind of is a bitch. And you know what? I would have loved if Roddenberry got his hands on this episode. It would have been weird and way more sexual, but you know what? At least it would have been interesting. Elaan of Troyes is a very boring episode with, unfortunately, a major character introduced in it who is the most annoying fucking woman in the goddamn franchise ever. This is down there with one of the worst episodes of Star Trek I have ever seen. Great beginning, aren't we? Right? This is one of those that I find the most annoying, and the episodes I notably will never ever want to go back to. I would rather get my eyeballs gouged out. Again, we are in the beginning of the video, aren't we? Oh god. At least it's all like uphill, right? Play the art you out of your Vulcan mind. Next up is Spectre of the Gun. This is one of the episodes I don't have much to really mention to it, besides the fact that it's odd and just Very weird. The Federation wants to contact the Meltonians, and they find a buoy that telepathically sends a message, which all of the characters hear in their own languages. That part's fun. The rest of the episode sure isn't, because they're brought down to this planet, which they believed was uninhabitable, but now they're apparently cowboys. They're in this, like, bad recreation, on purpose, of course, but also clearly because they had no budget, where they're at the OK Corral. That's a little reference to the Doctor Who videos. Watch those. We're unlike how the Doctor Who characters ended up almost getting in the gunfight at the OK Corral because they were part of one of the gangs. Our Federation crew's on the other gang, so it's just kind of funny to imagine the Doctor and friends from that part getting in a gunfight against, like, Kirk and crew. But thankfully this is all just some kind of telepathic thing, and they're able to just have Spock mind meld them to pretend that none of this actually matters, because it doesn't. The Meltonians are just like, man, that was cool. Maybe we'll join the Federation now that we've, like, nearly tried to kill you with our mind. It's interesting that the Meltonians, who look like weird brain guys, aren't some kind of, like, magical beings. They are just, like, able to mess with your mind and make you see things. And it's like, I'm pretty sure because there's several of these in this era that, like, the Federation definitely has the ability to fight against these kinds of creatures. And that's why we don't see too much of them in the years after this. Yeah, you can skip this one. It's like one of the more notable ones for the fact that it, like, just noticeably looks much cheaper than the other episodes. I don't care for this one, and I like cowboy shit, so, like, this should have been very fun, and it sure wasn't. Paradise Syndrome, the big three go down to the planet and find an obelisk. They're not sure what it is, but it traps Kirk in it, and because this planet's about to get, like, hit by an asteroid, and they have to make sure that they intercept the asteroid before it wrecks the planet, they kind of just leave Kirk there. So Kirk spends like a month with the, like, native people of the planet who fully think he's a god, until eventually the asteroid gets too close because the Enterprise was too late in getting to the asteroid. And after he is both incapable of stopping this asteroid and also clearly shows that he bleeds to the people, they don't believe he's a god anymore. And end up killing this woman who he had a relationship, who was definitely pregnant with his child. Thankfully, though, it's Spock that figures out that the obelisk is actually some kind of thing made specifically to deflect asteroids, made by the Preservers, who I'm pretty sure are those weird-looking bald guys from TNG. I'm thinking that the online game does say that, and I'm not making it up in my head, but if it doesn't, then I am going with that in my head canon. Spock, of course, mind melds back Kirk's old memories, but I don't think he, like, fully forgot about the whole thing. Paradise Syndrome is, in general, okay, if you ignore the fact that it's very weird. I'm sure stories like this are good for people who want to pretend that they're better and smarter than other people, but it's just not the kind of episode I'd like to see, and not the kind of story I think really matters in modern day, right? It's not really fun to see the modern white man going to the Native American tribes and showing them the way of the future, and they immediately look at him and go, he must be a god. Unless clearly played for laughs, like it's like Road to El Dorado, this is not something that really is the kind of story that I think was good even back in the day, and certainly not years later. They don't do anything else besides it. It's just Kirk going, I am Kirk. I know the future, I guess I'm a god. And it's like, okay, Kirk, you're wacky. Next up is the Enterprise incident. The Enterprise incident is one of a few episodes of Season 3 that Paramount, at least from the last time I looked at them, will in fact recommend to you in terms of which episodes to watch first. So in terms of picking out any Season 3 episode, why this one? It's because it has Romulans in it, and that's really it. Kirk has been acting very weird about things, and McCoy has sort of noted it in his log. People get very worried when Kirk just tells them to go through the Romulan neutral zone, of which they are immediately beset by some Romulans who have Klingon ships, notably just sort of said because they wanted to reuse those props. But it did result in a whole, like, canon thing in the books that basically is one of those extra canon stuff that has to be accepted of the Romulans and Klingons were okay for a minute, and they like gave some of them some of their ships, I guess. Sub-Commander Tal demands the surrender of the Enterprise, and Kirk is gonna blow up the Enterprise if any of the Romulans take over. Kirk and Spock go on the ship. Tal is super ready to bone Spock, and after they go back to the Enterprise, Spock tells McCoy to declare Kirk insane, and when he starts freaking out, he seemingly is killed by Spock. Obviously, he is not. His whole insane act and his supposed death was also they could basically put him in Romulan face to have him pretend to be a Romulan worker. This oddly doesn't work as well as you would think. Really, it's just because Tau wants to bone Spock so hard is why they're able to go around and spy into the Romulan vessel to get what they were actually looking for, which was a Romulan cloaking device. Using the cloak, they're able to get out of the whole situation, which is kind of cool. You would think that there would be sensors, so they would still spot them, but whatever. This episode did bring in the question of why didn't they use cloaking, now that they definitely clearly have it, but later on they would establish in TN part of the treaty. I'm pretty sure there was a big part of the Federation Romulan treaty that the Federation could not use cloaking device. It's honestly not all that great of a plot point, but it does at least show that while until the Defiant, that the Federation doesn't have a ship that uses any cloaking. I still don't know why there is no sensors for why there are cloaked ships. There are ways they can detect if there has been one around. The fact that we can't just see it while it's cloaked is one that doesn't get answered for me. The Enterprise incident is not an amazing episode. It's just all right. I don't think it's all that interesting. Not boring or anything, but it's pretty generic, you know? The Romulans could be a lot more interesting. You could really go into more about this plan that they're doing. It really just it's interesting that they kind of keep us in the dark and then reveal it later, but what does Kirk do after that besides sneak around, you know? There was almost more intrigue in the first half of the episode, and then it goes away. Also, what a bad disguise. Like, good lord. But the episode isn't all that bad. It's okay. It's not on the same heights as the much better episodes of those first two seasons, but it's certainly better than some of the others, like the Omega Factor, or other episodes of this season. It's one of the best of the season, and it's a big standout, mostly due to the fact that it's just okay, I guess. It could have been a lot better, a lot more interesting, but for what it is, you know, it gives us more Romulans, I guess, and that's cool. Look at the old Romulan symbol, by the way. Glad they changed that. And the children shall lead. Oh my god. This episode is actively one of the worst in the entire franchise. You can quote me on saying this, but I hate children. I do not wish to be around them. So when a whole episode of a show that I enjoy happens to involve a very annoying one or a whole group of them, I just get angry. And that's what this sure is. A bunch of kids are found after their parents are found dead and they start fist pumping, so a fucking green ghost shows up and starts fucking with the Enterprise. They take over the Enterprise. A group of children take over the Enterprise until Kirk goes, "Ghost bad," and they're like, "Ghost is bad," so they fist pump the ghost out of existence. The kids can't act, and neither can Melvin Belly as Gorgan, because why the fuck are you here? It's one of the most annoying nonsense episodes that Star Trek has ever made, and I like when Star Trek can get a little bit weird or even goofy, but this is neither of those things. This is annoying and god-awful. Any episode with a green ghost in Star Trek is probably one of the worst and the most laughable things that this series has ever tried to do. And this won't be the last time that this happens. At least nobody's fist pumping in that one, unless it's in Beverly. The only good thing that comes from this absolute piece of dookie pile episode is the fact that we get the Arboretum again, which means possibly Beauregard is perfectly fine. We don't see him, but he's probably around there somewhere. The Empath. The Enterprise is ordered to evacuate a research station on the planet Minara 2, whose sun, Minara, is about to explode. There, our big three are forcibly beamed down the planet to meet some big heads, which are just start messing with them. And that's the episode. They just torture our main characters while this one girl just watches, and they're like, "How do you feel about that, girl?" And she's like, "I don't know." Eventually they figure out that she was one of the members of a particular people that live around here, and the big heads are like, "We're testing this girl to see if she has any emotions to seeing you just get hurt on things. And if she does, then we'll save her planet from the star that's about to blow up." Who the fuck are you? Who are these guys? Why are they judging things? Are they not the same big heads that we saw before? Clearly not. They don't got the whole vision thing going on. So who the fuck are these guys? I'm just gonna pretend that this chick and all her people are transported with the big heads far away into the Gamma Quadrant. Well, we'll never see them again, because who are these guys? I already mentioned I don't like the whole idea of a species looking upon a smaller one and judging them to see if they're worthy of something. It's always annoying when some kind of godlike figure does that, but it's even more annoying when it's just some big heads. Frankly, you should all do what the BBC was doing when it was airing all of TOS Star Trek back in the 90s and skip the episode completely. It's just not enjoyable. I don't like seeing my favorite characters get tortured for most of the episode without any actual point to the end. This isn't the whole Four Lights bit with the Cardassians, with Picard. This is just our three boys just getting beat up for no reason. There's no purpose to it, no message is given, and we just move on. What was the point? The Mark of Gideon. Remember what I said about the whole judging thing? And the whole fact that we have a very low budget? So here's the empty Enterprise as Kirk just runs around in it and goes, "What's happening?" As there is one lady and like a guy, and they're like, we might know what's going on. And by the end of the episode, we figure out that the Gideon Council on the planet Gideon, were just seeing them so they could get one of them sick so they could solve their population problem, which would result in the fact that a bunch of them would die. It's like, my guy, why? The Federation is here to meet with the Council of Gideon on the planet Gideon to see if they're ready to be brought into the Federation, which, mind you, was the Gideon Council's idea in the first place, which means that presumably they at least have space travel. Again, we're years before we found out that the reason for First Contact is because they find warp travel, but that certainly hasn't, lessened this impact. They, at the very least, of starships. They know how to do that because otherwise the Federation wouldn't have let them in or even near them. But later years, now that we know the fact that they definitely have warp travel and are on the level of what Earth was during Enterprises, they have the capacity for spaceships with warp that these guys could just, I don't know, get off the planet. In reality, Gideon doesn't want to join the Federation, and they never do, but they just want their population to go down. It's just like, I don't know, kill people? You're already going to do that with the sickness, so don't pretend that you're better for not killing people with your own hands. You're committing genocide anyway. This episode brings up no point and serves no purpose because no one even mentions this. Kirk is like, okay, I guess. That's weird. Almost an interesting idea with the possible overpopulation of a planet, as it was originally written by the guy who played Serrano Jones, Stanley Adams, who was told by his son that that could be an interesting topic. But after he gave them the script, they just messed it up. And his son's literal words after they watched it were, "What did they do? This dumbass plan did, frankly, absolutely nothing, and this episode is nothing, because all you're watching Kirk do through half of the show is jack and shit." So it's like, what is there to look at in this episode? I'll tell you, an empty Enterprise and an empty brain. Here it is. Here is Spocks Brain. The actual first episode aired and made for this season. Spocks Brain is a very notable one. It is somehow better than a majority of this season because it is at least stupid and funny. Spocks Brain is taken by aliens who need it for their computer, and they're confused why that's a bad thing. The males above ground are like cavemen guys, and the women's are below, and they are controlled by a big computer. The last one was all kind of messed up, so they thought that Spock's brain was randomly a good way to replace it. The Federation promises to help them fix their people after they agree to give Spock back his brain. What was the point? The original draft was nearly as equally dumb, but was incredibly different, and it's clear that it went through multiple because it became even worse. The fact that Vulcans can just survive without their brain after it's weirdly and magically surgically taken out of his head is astounding. This weird future scientific ability to take out someone's brain is a strange one, which thankfully McCoy learns to shove Spock's brain back in there. But did they keep it? Did they retain it? Did they do anything with that technology? I do not care. It's just weird that Vulcans can just live without their brain for a minute and they just need some dumb ass helmet to do it. I thought it would have been very funny had the helmet that they used been this funny signal helmet. Spock's brain is nonsensical. It's just the strangest thing possible. The fact that they thought that taking out someone's brain wouldn't be the dumbest thing of all time and nobody would question it really shows you how little they knew about Star Trek or sci-fi. Because excuse me, if you take someone's brain, they're dead. What? It's a good thing Spock was ambiguously alien enough for them to make some shit up. They just liked doing that, of making some weird things up that Spock could do in order to get them out of a situation. And while other times it's charming and at least has sort of made more sense with later canon expanding on this stuff, like the neck pinch and the mind meld. But the brain thing thing? Yeah, I doubt it. We would never see that shit even as weird as Voyager got with like Tuvok or any other Vulcan character. I want to see them try that shit in like one of the newer shows, and I want to see what people's reaction are there. Because in terms of the wackiest dumb ideas that this show has ever had, this is up there with the top. And that's why you should watch it. It's the funniest episode there ever is. It's one of those so bad it's good episodes, you have to watch it. To fully understand how stupid Spocks Brain is, it's an absolute recommend episode. It's not going to be some kind of well-written sci-fi with a genuine thought in it or some kind of like cool message. It's Spock gets his brain captured by some race of like computer women. How is that not going to be entertaining? Go ahead and watch it. What are you doing? One of the longest titles, For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, while looking into an asteroid which is about to hit a planet, which is now the second time that they've done that this season. The main three are transported into it when they find out that it is in fact a generational ship which has been traveling for an incredibly long time. They have no idea that they're on a fucking asteroid about to hit a planet. It's controlled by a computer, the Oracle, which Kirk is not easily able to talk to death. I'm sure he was very disappointed about that. Maybe seeing his friend as a computer kind of turned him off of the idea for a minute, even though Spock himself could never turn Kirk off. They eventually are able to convince the leader of the colonists to go against the Oracle and just take control of the whole thing. In the process, they also learn a little bit more about the history after they find the like secret library, and in doing so, not only finding about the history of the asteroid, but also finding the cure for the space sickness, which McCoy just had the whole episode. P.S. he was dying of space disease, which he sure just kind of got. He nearly gave up and was like, just leave me with the asteroid, but thankfully they got the cure, because the fuck, McCoy? What? Why? Skip it, there's nothing about this episode that is genuinely worth a damn. It's very schlocky, generic sci-fi. And it's probably one of the worst showings of McCoy as a character, who normally is pretty cool, and he just straight gives up after getting space disease. Is there no truth in beauty? The Enterprise is assigned to help the Medusan ambassador Kolos back to his homeworld. The Medusans are pretty cool. They are so, like, different physically that any human that looks at them will just go insane. Vulcans can safely view them by having these, like, Cyclops glasses, which is interesting. And they assign the blind woman to kind of help him. Just some random guy on the ship wants to bang the Doctor, who is also played by Diana Muldaur. Originally, it was supposed to be played by a whole other woman, but she was unable to come, so the director recommended her due to the fact that they worked so well with her in the previous season. We'll see her again in season 2 of TNG. But we'll get there. Anyway, this crewman basically tries to kill the Medusan, which sends the whole ship flying somewhere off in space. But after Spock mind melds with the Medusan, they're able to sort of merge together and find their way back into the galaxy. His PS nearly blinds him, but thankfully Kolos is able to give him his vision back, which is like, if that was always something you're able to do, can you like uninsane people after they look at you? The Tholian Web, one of the only other 2 episodes of the season that I would actually recommend. Hell, to be honest, it would be the only episode of the season that I actually would recommend, because the other I could kind of take it or leave it sort of thing. And honestly, it's really just because the Tholians are cool. These weird like plasma weird bug aliens that control these like little guitar pick ships that can make webs that could just crush you to death. The Enterprise is trying to look for the USS Defiant, not that one, this one, which is phasing in and out of reality. Unfortunately, they nearly leave Kirk behind for it to get phased out, and due to that, they are stuck in Tholian space. The Tholians are incredibly xenophobic and they fucking hate everybody, at least in this part of the timeline. So they nearly trap them by just shoving them in. They just get rid of them. Kirk thankfully is a weird, like, phasing out of reality green ghost for a minute, and they're able to find a cure for the, like, dephasing thing, at least for a person, which allows them to get back on the ship and temporarily use the weird phasing thing to get out of the web. The Defiant? Well, we'll have to wait for the Mirror Universe later on to fully get answers on that. This is a much more well-made, much more professionally made episode, and it really feels more like the other episodes from the rest of the show. It's got some very interesting camera work by Ralph Sineski, who, alongside the previous episode, Is There No Truth in Beauty, had some interesting shots in terms of how he used the camera, especially with the fisheye lens that he used, which added a lot to the oddities that are these 2 episodes. Originally, it was just straight up supposed to be like green space ghosts, but the idea of phasing was introduced later to keep it still more in the scientific. I also want to know that this episode is one of those episodes that I really use as why I don't count books as necessary canon, right? The Defiant, not part of the names of the 14 Constitution-class starships that were established to have been launched at the same time in the book The Making of Star Trek, which really shows to me that, honestly, if it's in the show, it's more canon than anything else that isn't that. Even though you could introduce on where characters went and what happened to them next by looking at the books and going, maybe this, you can't go, but the books, because a lot of books even made during TOS, during its filming, didn't agree with what would happen later on in the same show. Either way, both the Tholian Web and Is There No Truth in Beauty are episodes that I would recommend. Really more the Tholian Web, but I'd just like to introduce Star Trek fans to the Tholians and the Medusans because they're some of my favorite lesser-known Star Trek aliens because they just both look pretty cool. Not that I know what a Medusan looks like, because again, I'd go crazy. Wink of an eye. The Enterprise is seemingly taken over by some kind of unknown entity until eventually Kirk sees that everyone else has stopped moving because he's been injected with something that made him hyper-accelerated, whatever that's supposed to mean. It just means they go really fast and everyone else goes really slow, a race that lived on the planet that they're looking at. An accident happened and all of the race is now acting like that. And they're going to try and basically make the whole ship that way so they could, I don't know, they just want to take the Enterprise, and obviously eventually Spock figures out a way to get him himself hyper-accelerated and destroy the weird machine that they built to try and control the Enterprise, promising that they'll find a cure for the hyper-acceleration, of which they already have because Spock and Kirk obviously weren't going to stay this way for all that long. It's a nothing episode. Who is this chick? Why is the guy who basically turns on the Enterprise crew so into her that he decides it's perfectly fine to just die in like super time? I saw this somewhere in a cool Japanese superhero show, and it's a lot more interesting there. That guy fights big ass bugs. That doesn't happen here. There just is people in bad costumes. Whom gods destroy. Kirk and Spock beam down to Elba 2 with a new medicine to treat the inmates' mental disorders. They're met by the control center's governor, Dr. Corey, who introduces them to each of the patients. Specifically, he meets up with Garth of Izar. Kirk specifically mentioned that Garth was a fleet captain who went just kind of insane. But despite that, his teachings are taught in the Starfleet Academy, which is odd, but I guess it's just the fact that he was so great of a captain that they were like, just, you know, look at what he did and not what he did after. He has found a way to change his shape, and he has been pretending to be Dr. Corey. Dr. Corey is actually in a prison cell, and he captures Kirk and Spock. He pretends to beat Kirk to nearly get the Enterprise to take them all up, but due to the fact that Kirk, this time only, decided to set up a whole password system, he is unable to get to it. Honestly, I just find that scene incredibly funny. It's just worth finding this episode for that scene alone. Spock is able to get his way out and is able to get in the middle of the Kirk v. Kirk fight and does a who should I shoot sort of thing, of which does not take him all that long because of course Spock knows the difference between his boyfriend and a fake. Notably, we never see that drug ever again, though it is used on Garth, which seemingly fixes him, which I find interesting because it's like, did it just change his whole personality, or like, did he gain a new one after he went crazy? Did it turn him normal, or did it like basically act as a chemical version of a lobotomy, is what I'm asking here. They don't make that very clear, and it's never referenced ever again, which is odd because penal colonies are definitely still a thing, as referenced in parts of TNG. That being said, Garth is probably the best part of this episode. He just is very entertaining, and he should be. Played by a seasoned actor, he was even a man who would star in another Roddenberry pilot a couple years after this. But that's all this episode really has going for it. It's okay. It's an episode I think you could watch. It has a bunch of fun aliens in it, but it's not that bad of an episode, actually. It's not the smartest written one. It doesn't go all that high, but it's okay, actually. The Lights of Zetar. Zetar? I don't know. The Enterprise meets up with Mira Romaine, that's a great name for a pasta chef, where they go to the Central Library of the Federation. Memory Alpha, that's where I get all my information of Star Trek stuff, on the wiki. But of course, the Zetarans are these space farts, these space lights that have basically ruined the whole planet and have destroyed a good chunk of the library, which means a lot of information just up and was destroyed, which means any continuity problem can be explained away by Memory Alpha getting messed up by the Zetarans. And they, of course, go inside Mira, who, because Scotty was super into her, he shoves her into a vacuum chamber and sucks all the Zetarans out, who die out in space. Lights of Zetar is another space fart tries to take over people's body episodes, and I could care less. Let that be your best battle. The Enterprise finds Lokai, a man with a half white, half black face, and then they are nearly destroyed by Bele, a man with half black, half white face. They're from the same planet, but two different races that are at war, and Bele wants to take in Lokai because of the war crimes he supposedly committed. Bele nearly takes over the Enterprise, but then the crew are like, we're just gonna blow it up. Bele basically has to just relent in the fact that he now has to just let Lokai exist now, and soon enough the two of them find out that their two races were totally destroyed by the constant war on their planet. Eventually they decide it's better to just die fighting against each other rather than living without their species, and it's a little bit of a sad ending, but it just, I don't know. Though I think Frank Gorshin, who I mostly know as the Riddler, and Lou Antonio do very good as Lokai and Bele, I just don't care. It's the most like baseline children's idea of racism and inequality, and it's the most like just general way you could possibly describe that sort of thing, you know? There's nothing that was really said here or learned here by anyone, because it was the most, well, don't be mean to each other even though you look different, because you don't really look all that different. It's like, yeah, okay, thanks, guy. Are we in 5th grade? It's just the most like hitting you over the head message that this series ever does, you know? People think that, I hate hearing that the like, well, they weren't as obvious about it back in the day, when it's like, no, sometimes they could be hitting you right on the friggin' noggin with it, and it would be like this. Star Trek has always had episodes like this, where they just don't do whatever theme that they're trying to do all that well, or as smart as they think that they're doing it. With these guys being the last of their species, we actually ended up seeing other ones of their species in some capacity later on, but mostly just in the background, because honestly, this episode sucks and I don't like it. So I could care less about this species or the continuity on if any of them are still alive. Day of the Dove. It's a Klingon episode, so at least it's more standable than other episodes. This is another episode I find perfectly fine, mostly due to the fact that the Klingons are funny. They're trying to take over the rest of the Enterprise, as both of them are stuck there after a big space fart just takes them in the middle of an already existing conflict. Yeah, the Klingons and Enterprise were about to fight already, but then a big space fart takes them far away and then goes, fight for my amusement, I guess. To which they laugh at him so hard that he ceases to exist. That's how they defeat him. Besides the episode not being sure where the whole certain decks are and certain parts of the ship are, like the engineering, which should probably mean that the Klingon should have a lot more control that they do. It's a fine one, it's a watchable one. The Klingons are fun, with them mostly being led by Kang. It was supposed to be Kor from the previous episode, but John Colicos was unable to return, so they got Michael Ansara as Kang, and Kang's really fun for his whole own reason. It would have been cool to have a recurring Klingon villain in some way, but having any Klingons is better than none. They did finally get Sulu to get the katana this time. It is required Chekhov to get a broadsword and Scotty to get a claymore, which is pretty badass. Day of the Dove is watchable. I'd say watch it, you know. It's fun. You know, it's not all that fantastic, and there certainly are way better episodes, much smarter episodes, but in terms of fun little action episode, yeah, it's fun. It's fine. I don't really have a lot of problems with it. It just, I would probably watch others before it. That Which Survives. Kirk, McCoy, and Sulu and a red shirt go to a planet where after a tremor they lose communication with the Enterprise. And Benga, here he is in his last appearance in the show, finds the transporter officer had died, which apparently seems related in some way. The red shirt then gets evaporated by a sexy lady who starts trying to touch on people. And that's a no-no, lady. This is my no-no square. In the process of touching it, as some of them start doing on the Enterprise itself, we find out that that these ladies, of which there is multiple of them, are a defense system for this planet, which evaporates people if they get closer to the central computer. After shutting down the whole computer, they find out that the whole people that were on this planet were destroyed by the defense system. What was it guarding? This is an nothing episode. This is one of the episodes that I'm pretty sure was the last one that was ever worked on by Roddenberry, because it just kind of feels like a Roddenberry idea, you know? Sexy lady planet and they kill you? Come on, that's a Roddenberry idea. Clearly rewritten to be a lot less interesting than the way Roddenberry would have did it, but like, feels like one of those drafts that Roddenberry was trying to get out and wasn't allowed to yet. Now for Platos Stepchildren. This is the episode that people bring up a lot for a particular moment, and I want to really bring up why it's kind of not as special as people give it credit for. So this episode is a pretty typical Season 3 schlock. It's about a psychic species who apparently knew Plato a long time ago because they visited Earth or something. It's weird. They're led by this guy named Parmen, who is kind of going a little bit crazy, so the rest of them are just kind of letting him do whatever he wants, and due to that he's just psychically messing with the Enterprise crew. And that's the key thing, is throughout this whole time he's just psychically trying to break the Enterprise crew by making them do things that they don't want to do. All the way until Kirk is able to do a psychic thing and sort of fight back against them. Presumably, they aren't really that much of a threat because they're only psychic on their planet, so it's whatever. The real thing here is this, of course, is the episode with the first televised interracial kiss. This is the episode people do point to in that what I often say is that Star Trek has always been woke. And yes, that is in fact true. This is an episode that did push boundaries, which even back then, people were pissed off on. So let's not pretend that Star Trek was some kind of show that kept it in the background and didn't force it on you, when people were absolutely complaining when this thing came out that they were trying to force interracial marriages or relationships on the public when this moment happened. That's something that I can't deny. What I will note is that it kind of loses its spectacle when you kind of acknowledge why it was a thing. They didn't just do it, they were forced to do it. This is specifically something that the characters were forced to do that they really didn't want to do. As well as it's kind of not the first interracial kiss on TV, because they didn't even actually kiss. They turn away from the TV and don't even actually kiss. Though they do mime it, so the characters definitely did do that, which is enough for this moment to matter, but I feel like that's something that people don't actually mention, that this was something done under duress and something that the characters really didn't want to do, even if the actors did make sure that this scene happened. I bring this up not to devalue this whole moment. If this is really special to you, then that's awesome, but in reality, there's two other times in Star Trek where there were two people of definitely different races where they absolutely kissed. It's just the one people gave them much of a shit about, because you could, I guess, pretend that the other characters were white enough that it didn't matter to the very racist public who hated the idea of a black woman being kissed by a white man. So this moment is still important because it does show that which needed to be shown on TV shortly after the US Supreme Court struck down laws prohibiting interracial marriage. So this was an important moment for TV regardless of it not actually being the first interracial kiss on TV. I just wanted to point out that it's not really the first interracial kiss on TV, as especially there were multiple moments in shows like Adventures in Paradise and I Spy, which showed white actors kissing Asian actresses. All this is from a Wikipedia page, by the way. I'm not making this shit up. Just saying, don't get mad at me. It's correct. Regardless, this episode is kind of nothing. It's more Season 3 schlock, as mentioned. Besides this moment, you can skip the rest of the episode. The Cloudminders. This is an episode where our main characters go down to Ardana. They're trying to help out some of the members of the planet when they soon find out that they have a weird caste system where they send some people that they call troglodytes down to mines, which is weird. The rest of them live up in the clouds. Now, while I'd love to learn how the hell they got the clouds up there, of which a canceled episode of Enterprise would have totally had told us, which, damn, I wish we saw that, we don't really get too much of this culture other than that there is this odd caste system, because they focus, I don't know, too much on this odd romance between Droxine and Spock, which I'm sure is way more interesting to see them be all sexy, which, okay. Turns out, of course, the only reason they really act the way they do is because the mines have gases which make them stupid, and the people who are currently causing trouble for the Cloudminders are people who are trying to have them just acknowledge the fact that the mines are killing them. Kirk decides that the best way to show that is happening is to basically transport them down to the mines so that they start getting the stupid gas, and they're like, okay, we'll let them out of the mines sometimes. I wonder what happened to this planet. Out of all planets, I'd love to know what happens with the Cloudminders. This is one I honestly would recommend. It's not all that good, but it's also not all that bad. It's that nice, just in-between episode that, yeah, you could watch, I guess. The Way to Eden. The Enterprise intercepts the Aurora, a stolen space cruiser, of which they find a bunch of hippies on it. There are some kind of like naturalist movement who want to find their way to Eden, as in like biblical Eden. Chekhov finds in love with them, and sort of because of that, they actually take over the Enterprise. Now it's both kids and hippies have taken over the Enterprise. Kirk's Enterprise. Yep, the big mystifying Kirk's Enterprise that got taken over by space farts, kids, and hippies. They use it to take them to a planet which they believe to be Eden, but ends up being poisonous to them. They all regret stealing a whole ship, but then one of them goes, no, it is Eden, and bites an apple and dies. So they're like, guess we'll go to prison now. Would love to know what happens to these people. I bet they integrated back into society as regular people and stopped looking for weird biblical things. But it's good to know that weird movements like this are still a thing in the far-ass future, because I guess if everyone is free to do kind of whatever they want in a cool utopian future, some of them probably would make stupid cults and stuff. So cool. This Way to Eden is an obnoxious episode. I genuinely could give a shit less. It's not the worst episode. I think people hate it a little bit harder than they should, but it is bad. It's just kind of stupid. How did hippies take over the Enterprise? That's just stupid. The other thing I really want to note is the fact that it is the only appearance of the Galileo 2. This is because the Galileo ship which we saw in the Galileo 7, of course, was replaced by another Galileo, but they decided to go, well, okay, maybe we'll finally call it a separate thing to specify that it is something differently. But the one that was made after the Galileo 7 is not the Galileo 2. In fact, the other Galileo that we saw was taken and got lost in the Delta Quadrant during this time frame, as we would later see in Star Trek Prodigy. That's a whole story for another day, but it's notable that that happened in between seasons 2 and 3 before the events of this episode. Because I'm pretty sure the Galileo from Strange New Worlds is the same Galileo from the 7 episode, but the one after that is not, nor is it the same one as this one, which is definitely the Galileo 2, even though it is the third Galileo. What I'm saying here is Galileo, Figaro. In the episode Requiem for Methuselah, the crew is suffering from Rigelian fever. I am still not sure how exactly Rigel seemingly gives people this notable fever that is mentioned so many times in Star Trek, but it sure is a regular thing for some reason. They find a barren planet and try to get some stuff to help them out with this fever, but this robot named M4 nearly kills them. An old man stops it and he goes, you better leave or my robot's gonna kill you. And they're like, but we got dying people, can we get some help? And he's like, but don't look in my secret room. And they begin looking in his secret room. They find that he has a lot of like cool old stuff. Wonder what this guy is and why some of it is clearly from Earth. The old guy, Flint, starts like letting his servant girl to like meet with Kirk, but after they clearly keep hitting it off because obviously everyone wants to bang Kirk, we've been over this, Flint starts getting jealous and the two start fighting. In the process, we find out that not only is he in fact an immortal and is in fact a multitude of like important historical figures, but also this servant girl is one of many robots that he's been trying to create and try to give emotions to, which again to me shows you that regardless of how well they seem to act human, none of them really have real emotions yet, which is why the whole data thing is still important even though we have these wacky sci-fi 60s robots. After Kirk and Flint keep fighting, she blows up and dies, and Flint's like, get out of here, I'm gonna be sad. Kirk is also so sad that he basically tells Spock to mind meld. The memory is out of him, which it's like, really? This girl? Who you had barely any chemistry with? Sure, okay. Flint is played by James Daly, who again mentioned he is supposedly a bunch of historical figures, Solomon, Socrates, Merlin. He was nearly almost Jesus in the original script, and that's more believable than Leonardo da Vinci, whom I call bullshit on because I've seen Voyager and he looks like that. He does pretty alright though, he's a seasoned actor, so he should definitely give out this role pretty well, but unfortunately I feel like he just kind of ends up sleeping through the whole thing, as is the episode itself. Sleepy and boring and slow. Nothing happens here. They could have really did more with this character and this concept, but they end up just kind of just having him there, which I don't think adds anything to Star Trek, right? There's been other interesting concepts of immortals that live a long time or strange people connected to the ancient histories of Earth, but Flint gives me nothing. And frankly, this episode gives me nothing in general as well, and is a definite skip from me.
Buddy! So long, Methuselah!
The Savage Curtain. The Enterprise is conducting its last observation of a planet which they know specifically is incapable of supporting life, and then suddenly Abraham Lincoln. They are beamed down to the planet where they meet a lava creature who gets Kirk and Spock alongside Abraham Lincoln and Surak, an important Vulcan character that we'll learn more about in the later franchise, and decides to just send them against evil figures from space past. Genghis Khan sure is here. Philip Green, who is some kind of evil guy from Earth Pre-Federation, who we will learn about in Enterprise, oddly. Kales, the big Klingon Jesus equivalent character, who TNG will expand on. And Zora, whoever the fuck that is, even though the villains have a much easier time fighting against the heroes because they actively do kill Abraham Lincoln and Surak, the heroes are able to get on top of them, which allows the lava monster to go, "Good job, only living people in this place. Go back to your ship." It's like, what was the point? This is one of the few that Roddenberry did start the writing of the script on, and we know that for a fact because it was meant to be a commentary on how television network works and his opinions of them, but clearly it was rewritten enough times to kind of get rid of that sort of thing. So it's incredibly basic, two people hunting in a very boring, empty-looking environment, which ends up showing off how little of a budget you had by that point. This episode and the previous one have a lot of reused props, though that one had a lot of reused props from other episodes. This episode has the, Mork's outfit that they give to Philip Green. Is he related? Is Mork and Mindy canon to Star Trek? I doubt it. Alf is probably canon to Star Trek, though. Who knows? Notably, this is the last episode that has the entire ensemble cast until the movie. This is Uhura's last appearance, and unfortunately, she doesn't do anything in it. Now for the episode, which was the last ever aired. Thankfully, because we are going by stardate, this is not the last episode that we will talk about. But just note that this was the last episode that ever aired in Star Trek for TOS. The Enterprise answers another distress call from an archaeological expedition on Camus 2, where after the big three go down, they find Dr. Janice Lester. This is a doctor that apparently Captain Kirk knew years ago, and they had a bit of a thing. She's sad that she never got into Starfleet Academy, probably because she has a whole thing going on in her head that she needs some kind of therapy for. Instead, she is Dr. Coleman, who is her accomplice in a weird body swapping situation. I do not like body swap episodes, even when they're fine. This episode is even worse than that. William Shatner is doing his best to act like an even sassier version of Kirk, which quickly people catch on to. Janice as Kirk ends up messing things up enough that Spock tries to take over the ship, of which Janice as Kirk then puts him in court for, who he's defended by Kirk as Janice, who they begin to try and convince everyone else that there's been a whole body swap going on. They're thankfully basically easily able to, as Janice as Kirk, it breaks down right in front of Kirk as Janice, allowing them to swap bodies back. The episode ending with a stupid line of Kirk saying she could have lived a fulfilling life like any woman, if only. And people took that line as some kind of thing of, oh, I guess women can't be captains. How dare she want to be a captain, right? Thankfully, we've retconned that with female captains having always been a thing, female captains being a thing in the TOS era, thanks to the movies, and then thankfully, a whole series with a main female captain. Janice Lester was not able to join Starfleet Academy, not just become a captain. If multiple females can be in Starfleet, it should probably naturally let you believe that because they can hold any rank when that wasn't even a thing at all in general in the military, that means they could probably gain rank, which the existence of Uhura on the bridge should mean that she could be a captain. The episode shows that it has a little bit of a dated idea in terms of how it believes women should act, and even though it's technically not against the idea of women being in these kinds of fields, it implies that they'd be more fulfilled not being in them. It just contradicts itself, and it's just an awful way to end an episode, which was already a badly written, awfully sexist episode, which added absolutely nothing to nobody at all, and led to one of Kirk's worst relationships out of all of Star Trek. An awfully written episode, and this was the last episode that they ever made. The sets were being taken down during this time. Shatner was making this episode as Kirk, knowing that the show had been canceled. You could tell that this was the show on its last legs, and it's just hard to watch if you ever go back to it. And thankfully, you shouldn't even go to it the first time. Don't watch this episode ever. There's nothing to get out of it at all. Instead, end your season 3 watch order with this last one, All Our Yesterdays. It's also not the greatest episode of all time, but at least it's kind of neat. The big three go down to a to warn a planet that its sun is about to explode, but they find Mr. Atos, who finds out that he has allowed all of his people to get sent back in time. They have a weird time portal where they've set certain periods of time to send people so they can live in the planet's past so they can survive the actual exploding of the sun. What that means for the temporal change of events on like how they're able to like mess with their own histories, or if they end up being part of their own histories and had always been that way, I don't know. I didn't really think about that at all. I just know that Kirk goes through it, and then McCoy and Spock follow, and they get separated into 2 different time periods. Kirk's nearly put on trial for being a witch, but thankfully the judge ends up being one of the people that came into the past, and he allows him to leave. Kirk has to basically force Mr. Atos to get the portal to get where McCoy and Spock are, whom are nearly losing their minds. They're in the, like, Arctic, in the, like, ice age of the planet, and somehow that's making Spock become more feral and like primitive Vulcan somehow. It's just kind of stupid and a little bit goofy, but due to that ends up being a kind of fun episode. If you don't mind all of our yesterdays, which they went to like maybe like a couple more time periods just to see what they could do with it. The idea that Spock like reverts back is a weird one and doesn't make a lot of sense, but the fact that they do get stuck there in this big icy prison, I think does actually have a lot of tension in it, because you're not sure how they're going to get out of this, considering that they have like a weird messy time portal thing. With that being said, though, the time portal never referenced ever again because it was destroyed with the solar flare. This episode is where I'm ending season 3, but there really is no good like season finale for season 3. Unfortunately, we don't really get that, and we get nothing. The show is canceled in the middle of production when they were about to make 2 more episodes, one of which would have even been directed by William Shatner, called The Joy Machine. Overall, season 3 is not a good season. It's not at all good. A lot of it is just so unenjoyable. Even the episodes I recommend are like lower on the list of TOS. The rest of them are absolutely at the bottom as some of the worst of TOS, or even the series in general. Compared to the previous, this is a like 2 whole letter grades below where the other seasons are, as I'll put on screen, but for the most part, and a lot of what TOS Season 3 is, I just cannot recommend. This would be nearly the end of Star Trek in general. However, it had enough episodes to be syndicated. It would be now seen on daytime television to go through reruns, and through that, more people would be able to see it. Through syndication, Star Trek found an even larger audience than it had originally on NBC. It became an immediate cult classic in the 70s, and Paramount's insiders claim that the show had significantly improved its station's ratings. NBC had made the biggest mistake they could have possibly done by just getting rid of this show. By cutting down its budget and shoving in a different time zone, they'd completely lost a goldmine opportunity that they didn't even realize that they had. Through this, so much more merch was made of Star Trek. It became the biggest thing in the 70s. Through reruns, Star Trek was able to live once more, and though people did see more of Season 3, they saw the rest of Seasons 1 and 2, and through this, it grew an immense fan base, now known as Trekkies. They are really the beginning of nerd culture and nerd gatherings to eventually make stuff like Comic-Con. The merchandise grew, the advertisements grew, the money grew. Star Trek became a phenomenon which needed to be capitalized on. Had it been where it was in terms of popularity while it was still airing, we could have gotten not only a better season 3, but a season 4 and onward. Who knows how long the show would have went, considering how popular it got and how quickly that happened. Despite season 3's qualities, Star Trek, thanks to syndication, was able to come back to life. And through that, we will soon get the first of the several attempts at a continuation in Star Trek, the animated series. Thus, that is my video on TOS. Not the greatest season of Star Trek, though somehow, as we'll see literally in the next episode, not the worst season, but it is certainly one that did lead to a big downturn in quality in the show. And that's unfortunate, because TOS kind of ends like that. But thankfully, as mentioned, Star Trek was able to continue onward and would continue to live on, and thankfully is still around till today in various forms. As mentioned, next up we'll be talking about the animated series and where it decides to go with the original series' characters and how weird it can get. But until then, I've been the Movie-a-thonner. I hope you enjoyed this review of TOS, and if you have any other ideas of what you want me to cover in the future, whether it be Star Trek or other things, then leave that stuff in the comment, and make sure you subscribe for more videos in the future. Most importantly, stay good, stay safe, and live long and prosper.